So, the Iraqi army has American M1 Abrams tanks. Those tanks were used a lot in the war against the Islamic State. At first glance, there is not too much interesting about that. There is war, you use tanks. But one thing many people haven't heard about, but don't know much about in detail, or haven't heard anything about at all, was the drama connected to the Iraqi M1A1 Abrams tanks and their use in the war. This drama is what we're gonna talk about in today's video. So hello and welcome and enjoy this video. And by the way, I will now try to always put the sources of my information in the video description, just for transparency and so that you can learn more by yourself if you want to. So, after the invasion of Iraq and after Mr. Hussein's government became history, starting in 2004, the US began training and equipping a new Iraqi army to help stabilize the country which they, ironically, themselves destabilized. This new army, which had many Shia and Kurdish recruits, was created to take the place of the disbanded Iraqi forces. At first, the US provided basic weapons and training, but later they started supplying more advanced equipment like tanks. In 2008, the US and Iraq signed the Status of Forces Agreement, which laid the groundwork for the withdrawal of US troops and put worth on Iraq's sovereignty. The US began handing over security responsibilities to Iraqi forces and initiated the drawback of American troops. The official US combat mission ended in 2010, which is ironic, because if there's one thing America loves more than freedom, it's forgetting why they went somewhere in the first place. All the US troops were completely withdrawn by the end of 2011. Now, getting to the tanks, the Americans started the process of selling 140 tanks to Iraq for $2 billion in 2008. Those tanks were finally supplied between 2010 and 2012. This was supposed to show the US commitment to strengthening Iraq's new military and was part of a larger plan to help Iraq manage its own security. We'll see how well that worked. This was also for the Iraqis to replace some armored units which previously operated Soviet vehicles. By 2011, Iraq had received 140 Abrams tanks. The final shipment of M1A1 Abrams tanks arrived at the Bismaya Combat Training Center in mid-August 2011. As part of the tank sale, the Pentagon made a deal with General Dynamics Land Systems, a company in Michigan which builds the Abrams tanks. Their workers would maintain Iraq's M1A1 Abrams, repair damages from battle, and train Iraqi mechanics to fix the tanks themselves. But I don't really think the last one actually happened for reasons we're gonna talk about later. The US Army paid General Dynamics $320 million for this work, starting in 2012. This was part of the FMS package, in which the Iraqi Army also received training for their M1A1 operators. After the US left, Iraq had a serious problem with the rise of the Islamic State in 2014. The Iraqi Army, which was still dealing with problems like corruption, low morale and inefficiency, was caught off guard by ISIS' June 2014 blitzkrieg into Iraq. During this time, several M1A1 Abrams tanks that the US had given to Iraq even ended up in ISIS' hands. This forced the US to bomb the Islamic State's M1A1 Abrams in airstrikes so that they couldn't harm anyone with American equipment. Over the first 3 months of battle in Iraq, around 1/3 of the Iraqi Army's M1A1 Abrams tanks were damaged, destroyed or captured by the Islamic State. By December 2014, the Iraqi Army had only about 40 working Abrams tanks left. That same month, the US Department of State approved selling another 175 Abrams tanks to Iraq, probably to support the war effort against ISIS, or to low-key attack Kuwait again, who knows. Now, after a few years of war against the Islamic State, the Iraqi army again had a big problem. The US company which repaired Iraq's M1A1 Abrams tanks pulled out many of its workers from Iraq after at least 9 of their tanks ended up with pro-Iran militias which have been fighting against the Islamic State alongside the Iraqi army. And I don't think I need to explain to you that the US isn't really a big fan of Iran, even if its proxies fight against ISIS. And that was a problem because it meant many of Iraq's Abrams tanks couldn't be used in battle anymore because maintenance could not be provided. This put their fight against the Islamic State at high risk because many of Iraq's M1A1 Abrams were not battle ready, which was a big loss to the army's firepower. As for the pro-Iranian militias which got hands on the M1A1 Abrams, The Hezbollah brigades were one of them. The Iranian-backed Shiite group Kataib Hezbollah, which the US designated as a terrorist organization, were reported to be using M1A1 Abrams tanks, and they even released videos showing the tanks being moved by trucks to join the Battle of Mosul. One video showed an M1A1 tank with the flag of Kataib Hezbollah. Another video from February 2016 showed an M1A1 Abrams tank with the flag of Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada, which is another militia which is connected to Iran. The Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF, are also a Shiite unit connected to Iran but permitted to fight by the Iraqi government. It's unclear whether these tanks were captured from the Islamic State, stolen from Iraq's military, or given to them by God knows who. After this, one Iraqi armored brigade made an interesting move. After the US complained that their tanks were in Iran's proxies' hands, the brigade started swapping its American M1A1 Abrams tanks for Russian T-90S main battle tanks. The Iraqis basically wanted to show that the US didn't have a monopoly on tanks and that they could get tanks from Russia as well. The Iraqis even released a video on YouTube in which they flexed their new Russian T-90s. The US really just wasn't happy about that. According to a Central Command spokesperson, Iraqi authorities had to follow the rules for using US defense equipment as agreed with the US government. They also mentioned that Iraq had managed to recover several of the missing tanks. The contractor from General Dynamics said that only 2 M1A1 Abrams tanks were still missing, but getting back 7 of the 9 missing tanks wasn't enough to satisfy the State Department and the Pentagon. The US put more pressure on the Iraqis, but the Iraqis thought the US was, well, just talking and not doing. A contractor said that they talked with the Iraqi Army and the Iraqi Ministry of Defense several times a week, and they didn't believe they would actually leave until the last 10 days. According to a coalition spokesperson, the M1A1 Abrams maintenance program for the Iraqi security forces was still active and there were no plans to end it soon. But realistically, the tank's maintenance program was on hold until the Iraqis got the last 2 M1A1 tanks back from the militias. Only 10 General Dynamics employees were still in Iraq for the M1A1 program, and their main job was to guard the many broken and damaged tanks in storage. The Iraqi army couldn't keep the tanks running without American help, and so up to half of the Iraq's M1A1 Abrams tanks were waiting for repairs. Looking at how the situation evolved and how they solved that problem, Iraq eventually got all the tanks back from the militias, which somewhat satisfied the US. But this whole thing still caused some tension between the US and Iraq regarding their military cooperation. To deal with the concerns and make sure Iraq follows future US military agreements, the US kept its Abrams tank maintenance program going, but on a smaller scale. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.